Hi guys, Tech here, and now we have all the confirmed official Grinding Gear games Ascendancy data, so now we can go over this together. This one is going to be a little bit longer than the previous one because now we have the details. So starting off with Stormweaver, it's Elementalist Light, 8 and 9, or if you want to go Manabot or Archmage, they're going to be really strong for those. Reading over all of this, you're going to see this trend a lot, so I'm going to just kind of briefly touch on it here, and then I'll mention it later. But there's a lot of thematic stuff that feels like it should just be included that isn't. Elemental Storm feels like it should just be an auto-include for picking Stormweaver, and then you make the buffed version, which is Rain Dancer, a single point notable instead of, and this is going to happen in multiple of these where it seems like thematically it should just be included and it's not. I have a feeling what most people are going to do here is take Heart of the Storm for survivability, which is 40% of elemental damage taken recouped as energy shield. This is very, very big. Great defensive layer. And then Scouring Winds, which is exposure you inflict lowers the affected resistance by an additional 20%. So you can push resistances negative. This is better than penetration. It's lowering resistances. It can lower them into negatives. And then what most people I have a feeling will do is grab these two in either one of Shaper of Storms or Shaper of Winter. Unless you're doing Archmage things, then you're going to go down here and grab Force of Will, Arcane Surge. You may go that route and then take these two. This feels like it's kind of just, I can't think of a scenario where you really want Rain Dancer over just getting both Shaper of Winter and Shaper of Storms, because this is a lot of damage. It's crazy amounts of damage. And then, like I said, what I think most people do is take 10 and 1 so you get some defensive. So pushing something lower and then either getting 2 chills or 2 shocks. But I really feel like Elemental Storm should just be an auto-include, and then you should have 1 point to get you into Rain Dancer, which makes it happen more frequently. I feel like that would be a really good class design. And you're going to see that there's a lot of those that I feel like should just be auto-includes because it kind of thematically doesn't make sense not to have it. Onto the Chronomancer. Temporal Rift feels like auto-include and a reduction to cooldown, or a way to use these time abilities more often would be a much better use of this point, I feel. Enemies in your presence are slowed by 20% is pretty insane and pretty strong. So is that every 12 seconds you gain 50% more cast speed for 4 seconds. Now, if this was controllable, which it is with Time Freeze, Time Snap, and Temporal Rift, this can be insane damage windows. You could possibly, potentially, absolutely wreck everybody. So it'll be interesting. Again, I wouldn't recommend this if you're not mechanically skilled, because as you can see, you're probably going to want at least 2 of the 3 of these. Even though I feel like Temporal Rift should probably just be an auto-include, you're playing a Chronomancer. Like, it thematically kind of makes sense that you could at least manipulate something off the bat. And I feel like it's kind of silly when your first point is something that seems like it should just thematically happen instead of something that's like really strong. I really don't like about this. With it being fleshed out, I think this Ascendancy is a lot better than I was originally giving it credit for. Tine, or as I like to call it, Asmon.build. Heavy Stun is insane, and Primed for Stun is really cool, as well as Astral Boost. Ancestral Empowerment basically makes it where you don't have to piano, but if you do, it's even better on your second slam. Aftershocks are really good. Crushing Blows are insane. So you get Crushing Impacts first, and if you want to, you can get Surprising Strength. Primed for Stun. You need to know this mechanic to understand what Crushing Blows does. Normal enemies are primed for stun when they have at least 40% heavy stun buildup. Magic enemies instead primed at 60%, rare at 70%, and unique at 80%. What a heavy stun is hitting an enemy builds. Crushing Blows cause a heavy stun on enemies that are primed for stun. So you get stuns as soon as 40%. This is big. A survival aspect of being able to just hit things with the stick. Also, 15% more max life. There doesn't seem to be a lot of max life. Most players are going to go like 8-6 and then either 2-3 if they're wanting to do big slams, or 7-1 if they're wanting a I'm going to really focus on the stun and just like lock up everything and be kind of tanky boy. Also to note that colossal capacity is, and hulking form is probably the single best point in any ascendancy, even though I don't think it's going to be used all the time because it's behind colossal capacity. And while that is good, you're basically missing out on so much damage. I'm not sure how many people are going to take. I think hulking form is the single best point in any of the ascendancies. It's insanely strong. Okay, so this is what Quinn's going to play. And I have a feeling he's going to pick 4, 5, 6, and 7. Because that will make him immortal, basically, to almost all damage. And not do any damage at the same time. So, you're welcome, Quinn. Now, as far as, like, why 6 and 7 are so good. So, Renly's training puts your base default block at 40%. There's not a single shield that I can think of off the top of my head that has a base block chance of 40%. It's huge. And then Turtle Charm says 35% less block chance. However, you can block everything whether or not a shield is raised. You can block all hit. What that means is you get a easier boost at scaling, even though it's going to reduce it some, but this is a huge boost to scaling it. So if you just take these two together and you invest a little bit in block on the tree, you should hit block cap. And then depending on how you're building, you should easily be able to get some sort of recovery on block and go over max block cap. I'm sure there's going to be a way to do that, just like there is in Path of Exile 1. And it's going to make you a tanky boy. Now, if you want to go even tankier with it, now this does require an equipped shield to do this. You do have to have a shield equipped. This is for one-hander. If you go totems, so Answer Call gives you a little minion to fight for you, but it's attached to the totem. So if the totem dies, it dies. Wooden Wall makes it where 20% of damage from hits is taken from your nearest totem's life before you. That is insane survivability. Insane survivability. So that's why I think this is going to be the Quinn build, is like he cannot do any damage. He can literally throw up a decoy totem. He will get an ancestral spirit, which will do almost no damage. And he can just sit there and block everything and recover. So it's like, you're welcome. Quinn, 0 DPS build, confirmed, it's in the game. So Dead Warden is really interesting. I like what they did with Point Blank and Far Shot. I feel like this is a really interesting choice, where you had to pick one or the other and you can't pick both. So in the old trees, you could pick both and they would both link back up to endless munitions. On this one, you can't pick both. You had to pick one. So you had to pick, or am I going to play up close and personal, or am I going to play further away? And that's basically your first choice in your Ascendancy path. And based on that decision, you kind of go the rest of the way. So Gathering Winds, I think, is actually what most people will pick as their first choice, just because Tailwind is so strong. I have a feeling that it's going to be capped. Oh, they did cap it. Originally, it was uncapped, and everybody's like, ooh, I don't know about that. That's going to be really strong if it's uncapped. So they capped it 10 stack, but that's still really strong, especially for leveling. So most people go Tailwind, either Point Blank or Far Shot, depending on what type of archery you're doing. Endless Munitions, and then I would guess they would go Avidity and make use of Frenzy charges and comboing. It is what I would guess most people will do with going Dead Warden. So Slayer Concoction is insane. So Enduring Elixirs is life flask are not removed from unreserved life, is filled, life flask effects do not queue. Stays active, so if you have bleed on a life flask, you can basically keep it up all the time. To get to that, you get 50% more flask charges gained, and then you're going to pick one of these concoctions. If you want to CC everything, you're going to pick Shattering Concoction. If you want to do a lot of poison damage, you're going to go Poisonous Concoction. Bleed everything and have bleed pops, you go Bleeding Concoction down here. It's essentially Old Gladiator. Traveler's Wisdom is really hard to pass up. 5 passive skill points is insane. However, because you probably really want Enduring Elixirs, because it's potentially the best single source of removing something you don't want to deal with in the entire game. If you are going a concoction build, at least. Let's say if you're going the concoction route and you're going here and then like here and here, this is going to be hard to pass up because it also means you can't get either of these two. If you're not going concoction, then you can go like here, makes it where you're not so dead set into this, and you probably go here and then just get a little bit into poison, or go double poison, go here and go here. But 5 passive skill points is really strong, especially for one single node. From a design standpoint, I do not like this. I like everything about Blood Mage except for your first choice is something that feels like it should just be part of going Blood Mage. Thematically, you're turning into a Blood Mage. You should just get the life remnants and skills cost base life instead of mana. That is so underwhelming of a first point to be forced into. And Jonathan kind of agreed with Zezerin in his interview that if it's mandatory, it's not much of a choice, and maybe we should just include it. So I hope he takes his own advice, just moves the whole skill tree up with removing those 2 points down or to the left or to the right or something like that. You can make a buff version, and all you have to do to make a buff version that is worth picking up is increase damage by 10% if you picked up a remnant recently. That's it. That's enough to make people go for that node, and you can have it stack, like 2 times. That's up to 20%, and you get it on kill and you get it on critical hit. So there's 2 different ways you can do it. And it can overflow your maximum life, which means you can get more than your maximum life, which is really cool. Now, if they would do that where you actually had build diversity, so the problem is you're pigeonholed into this one, which means you can only get one of these 2 nodes, these 2 big nodes. Personally, 8 is not good until end game. So what I have a feeling most people are going to do is go 5, 6, and then 7. How good a crit is going to be, but it is definitely interesting. What I think is better is to go 2, 7, 5, 6, which is what I would like to be able to do, because that would just feel really good, and it would give you a good amount of tankiness plus a good amount of crit. What you're going to end up having to do is axe this 6% crit and go 5, 2, 1, 7, and that feels like you're kind of all over the place and nowhere all at once. That would give you a really tanky and still has some damage build. But if they would remove this, you would be able to get one of these 2 big nodes. So you could either get a whole bunch of life from a heavy ES chest at endgame, or you could get 15% base crit, or you could get 10% extra fizz damage every source, and elemental damage also contributes to bleeding, which is really nice, or infinite curse duration, which again is really nice. So like if you're going a curse bot, you have to get this, and then you're going to get this, and then you're just going to go 7, 8, because like nothing else appeals to a curse bot other than just being tankier. So this is something where with just like a little alteration in design, they can make this a way better Ascendancy. It's so simple to do, and it's really about just giving you choice. Like just auto include Sanguimancy, make that a little notable instead of a big notable, and just be the start, or make it the starting point. Just make it the starting point, and then you can go from there. It's still interesting. You can still add another, right? Or just branch this one straight down here and have another one straight down here. But just make this like the starting point. They should do that with a couple of these. All right, so Azula, for those of you that are familiar with Avatar: The Last Airbender, and there may be references later as well. They were saying this is the way to play minions, and it's not. You get 2 things that are minion based. Is the will, which removes 25% of your life for +1 spirit per 25 maximum life. The other thing you get is Loyal Hellhound. Nothing else affects minions in the whole. Now you do get a defensive layer before going into will, so that's worth noting. Basically, you're going to get Loyal Hellhound off the rip, Altered Flesh, and then Baidat's Will, which is equivalent to like Merc Lab, or your third lab. And then your Uber Lab you can kind of do whatever with. I'm not a huge fan of this still, I feel like it has some potential, but I feel like they went too hard in the fire and not hard enough in the minion for it to really make sense to be minions. And I really just wish that this will skill was somewhere else on an ascendancy that mattered more. So I don't know. Like, I don't feel like, at least to me, this is completely unappealing for a minion player want to play, which is more of the classic summoner. This isn't the classic summoner. This is my second favorite ascendancy. Sorcery Ward feels like it should just be an auto include. Again, 7, you just move 7 here, and it's a 1-point pickup. And so feel better. Yeah, like it feels like it should just kind of be included. But I think the call is you get Explosion first, then you get Sorcery Ward, and then you get either Witchbane or you get Cull and Decimating, just more generic damage. This is if you want a better boss experience, and then you're still going to get Cull. So you're probably going like 1, 2, probably getting Cull. It depends on what you're having a harder time with. If you're having a harder time with clearing, you get Cull first. If you're having a hard time with bosses, you get Witchbane first. But I feel like you're basically like mandatory in these 4. Even though I feel like this should be an auto include. And if this was an auto include, then I still think you still put 1 point here just to go here and give you a better defensive layer. But I feel like you still basically these 4. And I don't think 5 and 6. So No Mercy is dealing more damage based on their consecration, is giving you a chance to hit before your initial hit is applied to chunk them for 5 to 30%. And it's like a dice roll. So I don't feel like this is good enough compared to Witchbane. I feel like Witchbane is so much stronger because it reduces their cooldown recovery rate, scaling down to 50% less. Insane. 50% less, that's half the attacks you have to dodge roll and things like that. So it's very, very strong. I feel like it's 8, 6, 4, 2. I feel like that's the exact order that I'm gonna pick ascendancies at. Gemling Legionnaire. This is how you play minions. You go 1, 2, which 1 was nerfed. It was 12% quality. Now it's 10%. Number 2 is +1 to all level of all skills, which is insanely good for minions. You also get 3 additional skill slots, and then you get 2 copies of the same support gem in different skills. That means you get 2 instances of minion damage. Again, this is just how you play minions. This is way better minion design than the actual minion class, which blows my mind why they would just do those things into Infernalist. If they had a tree that had +1 to minion skill gems, +1, and they put that instead of one of the stupid fire things, any one of them, it would be good. Like, really good in Infernalist. And then I would say, hey, go play Infernalist. Instead, you had to come play Gemling Legionnaire to play minions, which is silly. This is also the best design class, I think, of all of them. There's nothing which feels like it has to be taken, but there's also something for everybody. So if you want to play a tanky build with some damage, you can go 1, 2, 4, 6. You want to, if you're playing like something that just costs a whole lot to cast, you can go 1, 3, 4, 6. If you're wanting to play a bot of some kind, you can go 4, 6, 7, and then you can probably go 1. If you are wanting to play a stacker, you go 8, and then you either go 1, 2, or 4, 5. And so you just get a lot of versatility, and there's like not a wrong point. Like, all these points are useful for something. And this is what I wish more of the ascendancies were like, where nothing feels like you have to take it, but everything's like, oh, it's really good for this one particular thing, which I really, really appreciate. And they also did nerf Infusion. Now it's 4 socketed support gems for each 0.1 of resistance, which is still fine. That's still doable. So this is Avatar, the Last Airbender Ascendancy. So you have Katara over here, you got Oppa over here, you have Aang over here. Again, meditation feels like it should just be included for benders. The buff version that you could spec into could also refill Flask up to 50%. and that would feel like it's doing something. So there's this thing about thematic, and it feels like if you're a monk, you should be able to pray or meditate, however you want to word it. It just feels like thematically that's just something that a monk should do, kind of baseline. Like this should just be like a baseline monk trait. This shouldn't even be an invoker. This should just be a baseline monk trait. That they just get meditate. They just get it. It's kind of a similar issue I had to the blood mage, where it's like, I feel like thematically you want to pick this, but it's also like, do I want to waste the point? Where the blood mage forces you into it. At least this doesn't force you into it. And that's why it's better received. And you can play as Aang, which is pretty cool. The lead me to grace and protect me from harm are actually really strong. So what I'm guessing most people are going to do, I am the blizzard and I am the blizzard, I am the thunder. So they're going to go here and here, get all that damage, and then probably get lean me to grace, protect me from harm. So I feel like that's going to be one build where you're going to be a little tankier, do a little bit less damage. And then I think the other build is you're going to not get either of these two. And you're going to just go full on, I am the blizzard, I am the thunder, unbound avatar. And then you're going to get sunder my enemies just because, like, why not? And I have a feeling that's how most, like, that's basically like hardcore softcore version, even though I'm not sure that anyone plays it the same way they would in softcore now, because of this is chosen the Ascendancy yet again. Into the Breach feels like it should just be an auto include. Acolyte of Chuyla, that you should just get into the Breach instead of meditate. Like it feels like Into the Breach, meditate should just be corrupted into the Breach, where instead of praying, now you peer into the dark abyss. You know, like it feels making things that thematically make sense to play the build and to make it feel right. And we're putting it behind picking it instead of just including it and then giving you ways to scale it. And they already have the scale right here, which is behind it, which is effect and duration of Flames of Chuyla is double on you. So the first one is, hey, we're just going to include Into the Breach, and then you can double it for 1 point. And then when you pick that Ascendancy, you're like, oh, cool, I'm getting a lot out of this. Instead of, oh, I have to kind of play this. It's not going to feel any different than the other monk, other than like, I have purple eyes. I hope this is helpful. I really wish they would include some of this stuff that's just thematic into either the base characters or into, like, just bake it into the Ascendancy. Like, you just get this thing. And I feel like it would make it so much better and make the choices where they're actually impactful, instead of like your first Ascendancy feeling bad because you feel like you have to take this one thing in particular. But I will catch you on the next one. I hope you are ready for PoE 2. It is coming very, very soon. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the content. Feel free to like and subscribe. It does greatly help the channel out. And I will see you in the next one. And welcome to Path of Exile 2 for all those of you that are new. Stay sane out there, Exiles.